request that we scoot in. It's going to be a little bit more intimate, even though I know everyone just got done like crying and reliving some past traumas. We should be close together, maybe even especially for that reason. Whew. I have been dreaming about this 45 minutes for a while now. I'm so excited to introduce you to these people who are incredible. So when we came up with the theme this year of music ecosystems, these three people just seem to really embody that. And so what we're going to talk about today is how different systems of music work together with one another, and how they interact, and how we can take advantage of that and use that to support us in the work that we're doing. So I'd love to have you all start off by giving people like the 3-minute version of who you are and what you do, and some different ways that you like kind of connect across music performance, industry, nonprofit, government, all of that good stuff. So can we start with you, Ashley?
Oh, goodness, we're starting with me. Hi, y'all. My name is Ashley Shabankre. Yes, I'm the person that got up here and cried yesterday on the stage, and I'm a vulnerability queen. But my day job is I work full-time as the Director of Operations and Programs for Trombone Shorty Foundation, really working at the intersection of cultural music education with brass band pedagogy and with workforce development with a paid workforce development program for youth ages 16 to 24. They get paid $20 an hour, work with us for 9 months, and all go on to end up being employed in the music industry. I also am an adjunct professor, and I teach music therapy, music education, brass methods, and music business. And so for some reason I was like, adjuncting sounds cool. I'll make no money. It'll be a lot of fun. I have fun. These are the jokes, just so we're clear. I have such sarcasm deep inside of my soul. I am a trombone player and a vocalist. I play still very actively in New Orleans in several groups of my own, all original music. I have performed with folks like Alan Toussaint and Aretha Franklin. Quickly realized that touring and that kind of life was really not going to be the only thing to satisfy my soul, which is a big reason why I work in nonprofits. Trying to think of all the hats in this 3-minute version.
I'm thinking about Jen.
Oh, yeah. I'm the board president for Folk Alliance International, a member-based organization that really works at the intersection of folk industry. I am a recently elected national trustee of the Recording Academy, and I have served as the vice president for the Jazz Education Network and also serve on the Decolonizing the Music Room board. So essentially, my ADHD guides me. And that's...
But you still managed to keep that Duolingo streak alive.
Duolingo.
I respect that about you.
Yeah, it's really more for me than anyone else. A humble brag. I'm at like 1,700 days, y'all. So, no big deal. And that's me.
Okay. All right. I do not have nearly as many eggs, for sure. I'm Stephen Brackett. I am still currently the Colorado statewide music ambassador, of which I'm the first black music ambassador, which is actually not that big a deal because I'm only the second one. So it's a new thing for the state. I was in and currently still am a member of the band Flowbots that came out of Denver, Colorado. That band created an organization called Youth on Record, which has now been around about 17 years and serves around... serves around like 2,000 kids a year and trains local musicians to teach classes specifically in schools where those programs have been removed. I currently am in Fort Collins now as of 2 weeks ago, and I am the executive director for Foundation Music School, which is a cradle-to-career community music school that does both music education and music therapy. I have been working in Denver on creating an Office of Nighttime Economy. If you want to nerd out about what that is, if that's a new framing to you, it's extraordinarily exciting, and it's actually at the confluence of where most of our students and ourselves will be as performers. It's like we are usually working after 5 p.m. And in cities that don't have that kind of framing, that means there's actually no support for anybody who works after that time. If you're able to kind of take control of that narrative in your city, then you can actually make something that functions for young people and for artists. If you don't take control of that narrative, that means that bar owners, developers will control that narrative as well and once again squeeze us out. I sit on many boards, panels, and commissions for like the SCFD. I'm also working with an organization out of New York to build a national reparations movement. It's called Get Free for indigenous and the descendants of slaves. Let me see, what else am I missing? Probably tons of things, but you had just so many hats come out of the wardrobe. I'm trying to just think of all of the other ones. Mary, is there something I'm missing that you can think of? I'm an X-Men enthusiast.
You have lots of really great opinions about Steven Universe.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
That show is spectacular. And let me see. I just think I am always passionate about increasing the freedom for young people, because if we do not, then we will end up with a more oppressed society. And if we do orient that, then we actually might be able to free ourselves in the process. And I think music is one of the best ways to practice freedom.
Ooh, Stefan. Stefan is also like a super hella hype man, so you left that out. I'm Kaylin. I'm a tiny rapper. I started a band called Wheelchair Sports Camp, and around the time that I started the band, I was finding myself at more and more protests, and found myself hanging out with the Flowbots guys and found out about Youth on Record. I started teaching with Youth on Record now 12 years ago. I started teaching music production, and then I found myself getting arrested protesting, and then there was like a lot of people asking me to run for politics, which I kept saying like, no, I don't run for anything. And then it became this performance art piece, and then I rolled for mayor for a whole year and a month. And my big thing around that was like, well, we've been criminalizing homeless people for a really long time, and I was just trying to get the point across that like disability is at the intersection of every intersection, and it brings out so much intersectionality that somehow it's like left out of the conversation of intersectionality. And yeah, like I got into all of these things through rap music, but I'm not just doing rap music anymore. Teaching, protesting, campaigning, and then wrote a musical for Family Theater Company, which is the first all-disability theater company in the country. And we did an original interpretation of Alice in Wonderland. So then I got into theater, and then I built a permanent installation at Meow Wolf, Wheelchair Space Kitchen, which kind of took all of these other things like into a tiny museum of all the junk from my house. It's still on display, and yeah, I'm still playing music, and just got signed to a punk label, so I'm punk now. And I'm trying to take myself a little less seriously, although, I don't know. When I rolled for mayor, I had a mustache on my face the whole time. There was no masks at the time, but yeah, I think that's me.
Yeah.
Accolades, you know, it's hard to follow you two, but, and the fray, but.
Yeah. I think it's definitely, like, besides the bonus of making the rest of us feel inadequate, it's really helpful for us to see sort of people, like when you're a teacher, sometimes it's like, that was in the game of life. You know what I mean? It was like one of the career cards that you could get in the game of life. And I think about that sometimes for kids because it's like, cool, when I grow up, I will be doctor. I will be teacher. And we live in a world that's increasingly like, I do a little bit of this, I do a little bit of that. Even within the teaching profession, you're expected to do so many things all the time. And so part of this conversation, I would love to hear how you all like think and approach sort of what you do. Because none of you has like a real nice, neat in the box. Like, what the heck what are you trying to do? And I'm going to let you answer in any order. You can like bounce back and forth off of each other.
That seems kind of trauma-inducing. What are you trying to do?
What are you trying to do in here?
Live. I'm just trying to live, you know? Trying to survive. I was one of those persons that was like, I'm just going to be a rapper, and that's it. And, like, I started taking rapper photos before I was really rapping because it was like, no, this is going to be my life. And I remember my dad being like, you have to get a real job, and maybe you could be a teacher because on the summers you could do your silly rap music, you know? And I was like, no, Dad, F you, I'm going to be a rapper, you know? And, like, and then by the time I got into Youth on Record, it was flowbots.org at the time, you know, like, it's really hard to be creative all the time. Like, and to get creativity, like, I have to be out in my community. Like, I have to be in the alleyways, and I have to be, like, around youth. So for me, it was, like, an opportunity to still do rap music, you know? It's like, well, I can't just play it in my bedroom all day. So I'll go play it with, like, teenagers. And then it influenced me. Like, I was way more inspired to come home and write. And every job I've seemed to get, it's like I never really, like, thought I would plant myself in that world. It was like I just kind of landed because of music.
That really resonated with me so much. I think the thing for me is that none of this was planned. I never expected to go from working as a K through 8 teacher and then working at a music venue at night and then being like, I work at a venue now and I do cool venue things. And then being like, oh, now I'm starting up a nonprofit organization. I've never done that before. I'm 21. That's crazy. What's happening right now? None of it was planned. All of it were these doors that just revealed themselves. And I went, oh, that seems kind of cool. I guess I'll walk through that. And so I guess to the question originally of like, to the trauma-inducing question that we started with, I don't think that I ever thought I would be here. I think I ended up walking through the doors that I knew would help me understand where to help community next. And so it was less about doing what was right for me and more about doing what I thought was going to be right for community. Yeah, there have been cool things that have happened from like a musical level, but at the end of the day, like what I'm here to do or what I feel like I'm here to serve is young people just trying to survive so they don't have to go through the same messed up stuff I did as a kid.
You're kind of messing with me, Ashley, because you're kind of quoting stuff that's in my heart. So very literally, like my faith is a big part of my life. And when I was 21, everything that I was trying to do was not working. Every idea that I had for myself, it was just turning to ashes. I might have like the best plan, all these things. Nothing was working. I don't know, has anybody felt that way in their 20s? Like, it was just like, it was, man.
In your 20s?
Yeah. Well, I found like in my 20s, it was the worst. Because like for the first time in my life, I didn't have a plan. Like nobody was telling me like, you do this much to graduate. You do like, all of a sudden it's just like, oh, whatever you want to do. I'm like, don't tell me that now. You didn't prepare me for this. So I literally made a deal with God. I'm like, all right, okay, everything I'm trying is not working. You open a door, I'll go through it, and I'll trust that you've given me what I need to get through there. That summer is when I did my first deliberate work at a camp that brought kids from Israel, Palestine, Northern Ireland, South Africa, and America together to learn systems to break down hatred through conversational technologies. Never would have chosen that. One of the best things I ever did. And that's where I found out, oh, I really want to be in this space where the only reason that I'm here is because I had adults and kids who made sure that when my parents died, I still had a framework. I can also pay that forward. So that was my entree into education. And most of my friends when I was in high school are still friends now, most of them in my band, had similar stories. And almost all of us ended up going into education because we wanted to be able to pay some of these things forward. But I didn't choose it, but at every point in time, I was just looking at what makes this world suck less for kids, like I was. And then every time I actually found something that spoke to the brokenness in me and also gave me energy to continue to do the work. So for me, literally, being in the band was a direct tie from me being an elementary school teacher. The only reason that Flowbots originally got together and we were rapping over Nirvana instrumentals, 7 guys who were really bad at rapping, right? There was nothing there. But we all went to college, and we all came back with this heart for service. And Johnny Five was just hey, man, we should get the band back together, because he was in AmeriCorps Vista the same time I was an elementary school teacher. And he was driving a bunch of kids one day, and Ja Rule and Ashanti's Always on Time was playing. And he's a Vista, and he's trying to reach these kids, and he keeps on hitting this wall. But all of a sudden, these kids who would not say anything were all singing together at the top of their lungs with a joy that he had not seen thus far. And he's like, what can I do to be that voice on the radio so I can reach them? That's the only reason that Flowbots got back together. The link between us, sucking at rapping over Nirvana beats, I'll say beats, but just instrumentals, and then us actually being signed to a major label and all that was directly because we decided to get the band back together so we could see if we could be part of a platform that's reaching young people where they are. And when we did that, that was kind of cool. Being on a major label was not. Touring all the time and being extracted from our community was not. But forming Youth on Record was the thing that actually made it worth it. With our platform, then we were able to reach 3,000 kids a year instead of the 30 in our classrooms. So everything for us, for that, it could seem like a weird treasure map type of thing, but for me it was actually incredibly linear. And it's continued to be. What does my community need? And what are the things that I've done in the past that open up certain doors that allow me to facilitate?
Yeah, one thing that I just put together thinking about all this is you had mentioned how educating can be very insular. And for me as a musician, becoming a musician and trying to be anywhere above your bedroom is extremely insular. Making music is so vulnerable, it's so scary. Even those of us who have done it forever, it's still weird to hear yourself. I don't like sharing until I know it's gonna, get some excitement. I spend all this time, wanting to be a successful musician that on the inside, I'm how are the Flowbots getting all these shows? How did they get a record deal, right? How did they create a nonprofit? And so it's really interesting how, for me, getting into education was how can I share all this torment that I spent doing all this stuff by myself, learning how to book a tour, learning how to create a website, learning how to make my posters, learning how to get my bars up, learning how to do all these things I'm doing mostly by myself. And I hate it, I mean, I do it, but it's imagine if we shared this information. And so for me, jumping in with youth, it's or even just friends, all we do is yo, have you heard about this? Oh, I gotta connect you with my friend, because that's just what community is, right? And so it's really interesting how for me the insular piece is creating and being a creative, and that was what fueled me to want to share everything I can because shit is not easy.
I'd love to just like lean more into, okay, so now you have this like bird's eye view. You have like different vantage points of what it means to make music and the kinds of things that you want for people that you care about and just like your community that you care about. How do we tie this all into education? Because I think for a lot of us, I don't know, when I was in the classroom, I was like, these are my four walls. If I'm lucky, I have some other teachers in my building who care about me, my students. If I'm really lucky, I might have a couple of friends in town who can come in and show my kids a few things on guitar or engineering. But how do we kind of take that to the next level? Like, what are some of the things that you've done, especially like in early days, to sort of be like, this is a fake barrier that doesn't need to exist? And how did you start having those conversations with people?
I'll jump in on this one. So I was a classroom teacher, just so we'll start with that. But I quickly jumped out into that world of nonprofits. And one of the first things that I did as a young baby nonprofit worker, and I quickly started just cold calling all of these band directors and folks that I really admired their work in the classroom. And started having these phone calls with folks, asking them exactly what their needs were. And I started to build programs around exactly what they were telling me. So some of my first nonprofit work was with Preservation Hall. And one of the things that I heard was, well, they're not connected to their culture anymore. And because in New Orleans, we're a 100% charter school district, which is very complicated because every single school is a nonprofit. So you're working with 85 different nonprofit organizations, basically. What happens is that you actually have to go to each individual school to convince them that what you are doing actually is a benefit to them. So instead of going to one music supervisor, you have to go knock on the door of every single school. And I did that. And I spent a lot of time doing that work because I recognized that my friends and my colleagues in these spaces were struggling and that they wanted to make these connections, but they didn't have someone that wanted to advocate at that level because we just didn't have a music supervisor. And that's how I started out doing this work. It kind of transformed to where I did help them create policy for the district because no one was stepping in to do the work, especially during the pandemic, that I stepped in. I was like, all right, we're gonna all get together and we're gonna come up with some policy so that you can actually teach music. Let's do it. Like, I'm loud and vocal enough that I will just keep knocking on everyone's doors until you get tired of me and just keep doing the work. And what I hope for all of you is that you have someone in your community like that or organizations like that, because I assure you, they want to work with you. They just don't know how to get in touch with you because people aren't as brazen as I am sometimes. So many of us want to connect with your classrooms. So many of us want to pick up your students and get transportation so that they can come to our programs and serve as another connection back into these spaces that maybe you aren't familiar with. That is what we often are here to do. It's not to detract or derail from what's happening in your classroom experiences. It's to build upon what already exists and to help continue to feed that soul that's happening. And in some cases, pick up the young folks that maybe were too nervous to raise their hand to do a music program. So I'll kind of started there. Nothing like just really awkwardly just making everyone sit in their silence and feels.
Yeah.
I like it.
There we go. I like that framing. It's processing. Adding to that, because I really blue screened when the question was first asked. What Ashley said, I love all of it. And I imagine, like, when I'm looking at myself now at 45, I'm like, do I have the energy to do that again? No, I do not. But the framing I want to say is, like, if it's possible, and Ashley, I want to see what you think about. If possible, like, what is the phrase? Like, if you want to go somewhere fast, go alone. If you want to go a long distance, go together. So I'm also wondering if any of y'all are thinking about how do we, like, start Because for sure, I would say so many musicians would love the opportunity. And I also know that if you're to scan different jobs in the world, who are some of the most exhausted, it would be teachers. So this is why I'm also saying, is there the possibility of being able to have some sort of cohort that then you're able to kind of like share in the labor of it, and also then be able to like reap the benefits? So like, oh, I actually got a positive contact from this ska band. All right, so they can come to this school, this school, this school, this school. So I have found like most of the stuff that I've done with schools, like so Youth on Record, it wasn't until we had a big convening of all these other creative youth development organizations that I realized how few organizations were in the school district during the school day. And they're like, how did y'all do it? And I'm like, we didn't know any better. So we just said, could we do it? And like somehow we squeezed in between these very complicated laws and had something that was very difficult to get. But I'm also just kind of wondering in the same way, yes, the bureaucracy of every single program is daunting. It doesn't matter where you are. What you went through sounds incredible. But I do think that there's a little bit of like, let's try it. And I think it's far more sustainable to try it not in isolation, so that then like the efficiency of your efforts can maybe echo through more than just your school and your classroom. But I really do think that there's so much to be done in the asking. I think so many musicians, and that's how Youth on Record kind of got started. Like I came up to Kaylin, I'm like, hey, you want to teach? You want to teach some kids? And Kaylin's like, yeah. And like we experimented with some things. Some things didn't work, some things did, but yeah.
Yeah, I got really lucky getting thrown into education. Like, I literally got thrown in. Like, they had no idea that I had a background in engineering. They had no idea, like, this is what I could do. It was just like, come and volunteer, and the next day I had a job. And what was so cool about the Youth on Record model that really inspires me still, and, you know, I've been really lucky to hold on to my independent, like, contractor work life, because for me, when I come into the classroom, I'm not as burnt out as the average educator, right? And what I found in college was majority of my music professors actually aren't involved in music anymore, because you kind of have to make that trade. And so, you know, when my dad was like, you should just be a teacher, to me, I'm thinking like, I have to trade, right? Like, I have to put away my hobbies and my life and like focus on being the best teacher. And when I was able to kind of like jump in as a teacher once or twice a day, as opposed to, you know, 8 classes, 40 kids, like it allowed me to build relationships in a way that I don't think I would have had the space to. And I think, yeah, for me, what I'm always trying to accomplish is like more relationships, better connections. And that goes back to being a musician. It's who you know, and like how do you grow your team, as the planet falls in on us, like who's gonna be with us when the ship falls, so for me, like my main priority in pretty much everything I do is like making those right connections, keeping them, and like really earning the trust, because yeah, I've had students where like, especially at the treatment center, they have been traumatized, incarcerated, abandoned, victimized, abused, you name it. And then you throw on Ashanti and Ja Rule, and like all of a sudden there's that connection piece. And the more that we start to lean into that connection piece, it's like, oh, people start to like open themselves up, and we can really get somewhere. What do you want for yourself? And like, oh, have you thought about this? Or, oh, when I was trying to do that, when I was 16, like I found this. And so like just building those connections. And now so many of my former youth or young adults now like are also making connections for me. Like, I hope to come at youth in a way that I don't feel like authoritative or like I know everything. Like, the way that I approach it is just like, here's what I've learned. Here's like a blueprint. It's probably not the best blueprint, but it's at least more than I was given. You know, it's a blueprint to like expand on. And then when you figure out this spreadsheet better than me, please come and teach me how to make my spreadsheets better. And show me your apps that's gonna make my life easier. Yeah, so for me it's really about the relationship building, and music is the greatest tool of a lot of power. And you know, I've always felt pretty, especially as a teenager, I felt really insular and alone around social justice, and just seeing how easy it was for the world to just move on while we're destroying lives. And so back to getting into the classroom, I get to like show this, hey, you're not alone. Like, other people care, and like, here's some cool groups doing cool stuff about anything that you're really passionate about. And it's not always music, you know, like music lends itself back to this ecosystem of like photography, fashion, toys, merch, like you name it. Anything that you're excited about could lend itself to music. And what's more powerful than politics or oppression? It's probably music. You know, that's what's gonna bring us out of ourself enough to like let go of some of that trauma, hopefully.
Absolutely. Thank you all. I'm curious, for the folks in the room, who is able to bring artists into their classroom sometimes? All right. I'm curious, for folks who like haven't raised their hand, like would someone raise their hand and tell me what are your barriers? Yeah. Budget. Your ability?
Liability.
Oh, liability. I was like, what? Okay. Liability in the way back. Too remote. Isolation from like big artist networks. Yeah. Politics. Anyone else? How about just like right. Right. I have thoughts, but I'm wondering if
I
you
do
all want to
too.
speak to
so
some
many
of
thoughts.
these like barriers, because I just like, let's get into the reality of it, because it's like really easy to say that we should all be ingrained in our community, but like, how do we do it?
Right. I mean, first and foremost, a lot of us as nonprofit organizations have budget to send our teaching artists out to you. And so for those of you that do not have budget, that's okay. We really, really want to work with you to send you artists, educators, teaching artists out to your schools so that you have the support that you need. I know, obviously we've talked a lot about the teaching artistry with Youth on Record and the work that both of y'all have done. I'll also add, we send out artist educators all the time to go do brass band clinics, and we'll just do it. If you reach out to us, we'll just do it. And so sometimes the most difficult thing, though, is the art of asking or just sending the message to whomever it is. One of my favorite connections is that I had a teacher just email me randomly, and he was like, I don't know if you'll do this, but could you send someone to my school like the whole year? And I was like, hell yeah. We don't have budget for that, but yeah, I'm going to do it. And so we'll find ways to make it work.
How about in a place, though, where you are you're like, I'm not aware that any nonprofit like that exists near me, or I'm sure that no nonprofit like that exists near me, which is probably the case for a lot of folks in the room, yeah?
I think it's really important too, especially when you're building like trust in relationships is like, and I know it's easier said than done because it's a long work week and, you know, things are stressful, families takes a lot of time, but if you start to plant yourself in, I mean, there's local music happening wherever you live, hands down. And there's probably musicians like me when I was, 19 of like, I would love to come to the class. Like, let me volunteer. And they're like, no, we'll pay you. And I'm like, but I'm not doing anything. Like, I can't rap anymore, like, and you will find, as you have found in the education world, that once you plant yourself in it, it's really not as big as you think, and I think back to that, like, insular feeling, like, it feels scarier from the outside than just, like, going to any show and connecting with the person there. It may be an audience member that has a friend of a friend. It's just like I challenge myself and you all to, like, really just put yourself in these communities. And I find in the education world that a lot of students don't trust these teachers who maybe they don't think came from their neighborhood or don't look like them or haven't been through the hardships they've been to. But then you start to see each other at a show or the grocery store, and it's like all of a sudden there's more of a connection piece. And I feel like this in the disability world, in the medical world. Like, I had a great conversation with your wife about this, which is like so many doctors, similar to teachers, are like treating my body, and I can tell they've never been around people like me outside of their job. Like, it's I can smell it from a mile away, the way people talk to you. And I feel the same part about educators, where, like, I think a lot of, especially teenagers, are resistant to building a connection with somebody that they don't trust or they don't believe in. And then you see them at a barbecue with their cousin's friend, and it's like, oh, okay. Like, there's that connection piece. So I challenge everybody to just jump in head first.
Yeah, if there's like any kinds of like open mics, any kinds of venue shows, talk to the engineer. They'll be mad about it, but just do it anyways.
They're not the friendliest people.
as a rule. Yeah. And if you do happen to talk to an engineer and they're like a super friendly person, definitely invite them to your classroom because they're a unicorn and you need to like protect them at all costs.
I just wanted to add to that. A lot of the times with the questions that got lifted up, I'm like, well, okay, great. What are the tangible next steps as well? So I think talking to the engineers is one. But I also think, like, within your network, who is a friend of yours who goes to local shows? Talking with them about some of the bands, right? And then taking that list of like 5 or 6 bands and then literally getting on Instagram and saying, I am a teacher, do you have any interest in coming to the class? And hitting up each band at least twice, right? Because of the noise of social media, there's actually a chance that they may have missed it, type of a thing. When it comes to like liability and such, I know it works differently in all these different states, but a lot of times if you're working with a nonprofit organization, you will also be working within like some of their insurance as well, if that's the possibility. So for example, with Foundation Music School, and you can also reach out to some of the music schools in your community and see, because we would have no problem being able to send a teacher to another school because all of our teachers have to go to an FBI background check and all of these things. So that can be one of the things. But then when it comes to distance, all right, there's been points in times where my band was really big. I can't tell y'all how many times I've showed up at classrooms for free and driven like 2 hours to get there because I was honored to be asked. Like literally, one of the first things I was asked when I was first named the ambassador, there was a town called it was, oh my goodness, why can't I remember the name now? not Joe's, Colorado, Eastern Plains, near Fort Morgan. Oh my goodness. Well, what'd you say? Brush. It was Brush. Oh my goodness. Yes, coming in clutch. But that year, Brush had lost 7 children to suicide in 7 months. And that did not make news in Denver or in Boulder. And somebody read about me being the ambassador, and then so the superintendent just called me and said, would you be interested in holding some sort of music-based rally to get the kids' spirit up? Yes. I mean, and he's like, well, what is there? And he's like, well, I don't know if we have any budget. Like, I don't care. Like, let's make that happen. So I'm also just trying to say, not as though all of us will work and like be able to do those things, but I do think you'd be surprised by how many of us would be honored by the ask and the invitation. And then when we talk about the political things, if it's the politics within the school or if it's politics of the band, I do think there's also an opportunity once the relationship is established, because Brush, Colorado is very, very bright red. And when some people looked me up and saw that I was coming, there was a little bit of a hubbub to say in the community. But I was able then to come into the community before I did the event, talk to folks, and everybody was excited about it. So actually the buy-in was even higher because I was able to come into that community. So I'm not saying that it's easy per se, but what Kaylin is saying, like, if we start by being able to build some of these relationships, which people have done with my band. There was a school out in like Broomfield, before the band even broke, he just hit us up on MySpace. And we're like, cool. And we started coming to that school and that classroom every year. And it was something that we looked forward to. So I'm also just saying that if you're able to find your friends who go to bands, like who know the bands, you can start actually deliberately building up some of these relationships, and then also look to the nonprofit organizations if liability and such is an issue.
Literally, you could search music education nonprofit, your city, or music nonprofit, your city. And I'm not saying type in your city, that would be really weird, but like, yeah. Well, and you could look at what are the bigger cities near you. Okay.
Yeah, like 360 might be a good one in your area.
Oh, yeah,
and
of
like
course.
nationally, you know, to kind of, I hate to do this, but I know 2 of you have stuff going on tonight. We are actually at our time. I do not want you to miss your plane. I do not want you to miss your event that you have tonight. Can we just give these folks like a huge round of applause? Thank you for being here. I'm super grateful. Our hope is that this just like, life is hard and we have a lot of responsibilities. If you allow your brain to crack open the door to the possibility that maybe you could get some support in places that you weren't aware of, that's the hope. Not that you have to do more, but that you can find some support for people in your area that are going to care about you and your kids. So I'll leave you with that, and we'll see most of you at the Lyric.